What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we are going to be breaking down players that are currently rising and falling in 2024 fantasy football. This is due to the first full week of the preseason for the 2024. We've got highlights, we've got player stats, we've got overreactions, injuries, all kinds of stuff that are impacting the ADP of players in fantasy football right now. So let's not waste any time. Let's hop right into today's video. But of course, if you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way in, and let's break down these risers and fallers. All right, first on the list, we're obviously going to have to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. Rashee Rice coming in at an ADP of 53.1 on Underdog, and then Xavier Worthy coming in at an ADP of 64.4 on Underdog. Now, obviously, both of these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers have already been rising on draft boards. It's looking more and more likely that Rashee Rice may serve a suspension next season and not this current season. So he's already a player that people were going after. And then Xavier Worthy, on the other hand, we've seen lots of good chemistry between him and Patrick Mahomes in training camp. Some nice highlight reels there. So both of these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers have already been rising on draft boards. And the reason that they are now going to continue to rise is obviously Hollywood Brown's injury, shoulder injury that's going to keep him out anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. We don't have an exact timeline here. We know he went to the hospital, was released from the hospital today at the time of recording this. And obviously, with Hollywood Brown going down, that's going to open up more targets for both Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. I've done 2 Best Ball Mania drafts on Underdog since the Hollywood Brown injury, and I'm definitely already seeing Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy be more aggressively drafted. So even though it's not a season-ending injury for Hollywood Brown, he's still going to be a part of this offense. You're going to see very immediate reactions from the 2 players who are going to be there to start the fantasy season in Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. They're definitely rising in overall ADP. And that brings us to our most obvious faller. That's going to be Hollywood Brown, who did suffer a dislocation of his sternoclavicle shoulder joint. If I butchered that, go ahead and butcher me in the comments down below. But, obviously the last time we really saw a major player suffer this injury was Tyreek Hill in 2019, who also was on the Chiefs and was playing the Jaguars when he suffered this injury. Weird. But nonetheless, we don't have an exact timeline here. Could be anywhere as little as 3 weeks, could be anywhere as high as 8 weeks. Right now, we've got a few weeks until the season starts anyway, so we're probably going to see Hollywood Brown. I would say a fair estimate is missing the month of September. Maybe he comes back a little bit sooner than that. We shall see. Maybe he's worked in slowly. At the end of the day, if you have a high, exposure to Hollywood Brown, like on Underdog, like me, then I wouldn't panic here, because I still think you're going to see plenty of good ceilings out of Hollywood Brown. Maybe there's now concern like, oh, well, he's been, a guy who's dealt with injuries in the past, especially in the last 2 seasons. Now we already have an injury popping up in the preseason. You're going to have people say, I'm just out on Hollywood Brown. I'll go draft Xavier Worthy. I'll go draft Rashee Rice. That's okay too, but I definitely think we're going to see a large impact to Hollywood Brown's overall ADP. That ADP you see on the screen on Underdog at 56.4, I think is going to continue to fall. All right, let's talk about Jayden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. 1 drive, beautiful. 3 passes, 2 completions, 45 yards through the air, and then topped the drive off with a rushing touchdown. We saw everything you wanted to see out of Jayden Daniels from a fantasy standpoint in that 1 drive. We saw the ability to move the ball down the field, not with his legs, but with his arm. Great dot to Jerwami Brown on the sideline. I think you might actually see Brown rise. I'm seeing him get drafted at the end of Underdog drafts currently. But overall, Jayden Daniels just a promising drive here. We'll see what we get for the rest of the preseason. The Jets, although they may have not been playing their starters, this is still a team you think of defensive-minded and everything. So this was a good drive for Jayden Daniels. I think you could see some impact to Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson in terms of their ADP. But right now, Daniels, where he sits, he's rising in ADP. Solid drive for him in this past week. As I went to put this video together, we have an injury to Malik Neighbors, so this doesn't really to do with the preseason action, but I will say, we didn't get anything positive out of Malik Neighbors' first preseason game against the Lions. This is a guy that you would expect to get plenty of targets. I mean, think about Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Cardinals as well. Like these two rookie wide receivers, the two best rookie wide receivers in the draft, got no targets in their first preseason game. I mean, come on, Giants, Cardinals, what are we doing here? But nonetheless, Malik Neighbors exited today's practice, Sunday's practice early, is dealing with a minor ankle sprain, excuse me. So we don't really have a timeline here. The Giants don't appear to be overly concerned, but I would definitely expect until we get a timeline. Right now, you're going to see some people start to come off of Malik Neighbors going at a pretty high ADP of 24.9 on Underdog. And don't say that like there aren't going to be people who, even if we get a timeline of like, oh, he's fine, right? Or he'll be back in 2 to 3 weeks, whatever it's going to be. There's still going to be people a little worrisome about Malik Neighbors because they're already worried about Malik Neighbors and this Giants offense. Daniel Jones at quarterback. Now you add an injury into the mix. People will be coming off of Malik Neighbors. Look at Puka Nakua, who like Sean McVay has come out and said he's fine, right? And there's still people who are like, I'm not drafting Puka Nakua at the end of the first. Now I prefer him at the beginning of the second. Malik Neighbors will probably fall just a little bit in terms of his overall ADP, unless we find out, of course, this is a serious injury. All right, next up, we got Caleb Williams, a very solid drive out of Caleb Williams. Didn't throw a touchdown or anything, had 13 rushing yards, and then was 4 of 7 for 95 total passing yards. But if you just watch this game, you got a great feel out of Caleb Williams, a nice little shuffle pass to my boy DeAndre Swift, great pocket presence, an absolute dart to Cole Kmet on third down. Just good decisions in the pocket, looked the part as a number one overall selection. So his ADP on Underdog's 111.9. I still think there's a couple quarterbacks who I prefer at their ADP over Caleb Williams. I still think in terms of a rookie season, when we look at good rookie seasons for quarterbacks, it's not very common that we get like that Justin Herbert rookie season from a couple years ago where he was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. You look at CJ Stroud last year, the best performing rookie quarterback out of last year. He was still top 12 quarterback, QB 11 in most scoring formats. So 18.5 fantasy points per game or whatever it was. I think Caleb Williams can definitely hit that. But at where he's getting drafted, I don't know if I'm 100% in on pulling the trigger, but I do think Caleb Williams is going to be a player who performs well as long as he stays healthy and this whole Bears offense stays healthy. But I can tell you right now, for people who had faith or wanted to go out and draft Caleb Williams in fantasy football, based on the performance we got this past weekend, you're going to see him rise in ADP. All right, next up, I want to talk about Trey Benson. And I think the interesting thing with Trey Benson is we've already got some coach speak out of Jonathan Gannon, like that he likes Amari DeMarcado as the RB2 for the Cardinals. And we haven't really gotten the best buzz around Trey Benson through training camp. Obviously, being a guy, caliber of player coming out of college, he could come in and really be viewed as an RB1. But now when we look at this Cardinals backfield, man, it's just a mess. You did see Trey Benson get 8 touches versus the Saints, but just 2.6 yards per carry. You saw DJ Dallas and Tony Jones also get involved in the mix. And Tony Jones also involved in the passing game. We did not see Trey Benson involved in the passing game whatsoever. But then the interesting thing here is Michael Carter got 7 touches, 41 total yards, 5.9 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Now, some of these guys are going up against 4th stringers, 3rd stringers, 2nd stringers, a mix of all of the above. So it's not like you can always get an accurate total picture here. So I'm not going to count Trey Benson completely out, but I do think with some of the coach speak, the kind of the not so great buzz we've gotten out of Cardinals camp, and now the fact that we got Michael Carter in the mix and then 2 other running backs who've done things in the past in the mix as well, I think you could see Trey Benson fall back a little bit because there's not really anything that gives you immediate confidence unless we see like a James Conner injury in Trey Benson at the moment. All right, next up, we got T. Higgins at an ADP of 43.4 on Underdog. So it's not like T. Higgins is not getting drafted or anything, but I have been talking about T. Higgins lately, and I think this is interesting because now when you go over to the Sleeper app, I mean, his ADP is 56.6, and this is the reason I've been talking about T. Higgins is because he's like a 4th, 5th round selection, depending on your league and league size and everything. And I just don't really understand this. I think that Higgins, where he's being drafted, is an absolute steal, and he reminded you of that on this past weekend as well. I mean, Joe Burrow looked great, 5 of 7, 51 total passing yards, a touchdown, and in that drive capped off with a touchdown to T. Higgins. Now, obviously, Jamar Chase wasn't out there, but even when Chase is out there, that's good for T. Higgins, less defensive pressure as a whole. So for me, Higgins just reminding you why he's a great value in fantasy football right now, why he's still a viable option in this passing attack for the Bengals. That touchdown is going to get in people's mind, and they are going to start to see T. Higgins in, middle of the fourth, beginning of the fourth, beginning of the fifth, whatever it is, and they're going to say, you know what, I am going to draft T. Higgins over player X, Y, and Z. T. Higgins, I think, continues to be a great value and is going to rise in ADP. And I also do want to mention Jermaine Burton, who looked really good in this game as well. 3 receptions, 82 total receiving yards, 27.3 average yards per catch, and a touchdown. Jermaine Burton, definitely a player who's had a lot of buzz throughout the offseason, a great draft prospect, player who in a lot of dynasty leagues got a lot of buzz going into rookie drafts. So I like Jermaine Burton, what he did in this game as well. Definitely a player to continue to keep an eye on in the offseason in terms of the Bengals wide receivers. All right, next up, let's talk about Marshawn Lloyd. Just 1 touch for Marshawn Lloyd, 8 yards, 1 catch, 1 yard in that preseason action against the Browns. But more importantly, he suffered a hamstring injury. Not like anyone was going out of their way maybe to draft Marshawn Lloyd in terms of like redraft formats, but in Underdog, this was definitely a player, with the groin injury to Josh Jacobs earlier in the month that people were like going out and drafting aggressively. And then now we're getting good coach speak about A.J. Dillon. We're getting news about A.J. Dillon being in great shape. Maybe A.J. Dillon's season is upon us. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but if anything, Marshawn Lloyd just not in the best situation in terms of, taking advantage of the opportunity because he got hurt. And people will now look at him as a player who, even if this is a short-term injury, injuries get in people's mind. The performance that we got out of him, obviously he was hurt, was not great either. So there's just not any reason for him to rise or put confidence in people when they are looking at draft boards, looking at handcuffs in those later rounds. So I do think it's very likely we see, at least for the immediate moment, Marshawn Lloyd move back in terms of a handcuff running back that players are targeting. All right, next up, we got my boy Zamir White, an ADP of 88.8 on Underdog, and I'm going to continue to tell you guys that Zamir White is one of the best values in all of fantasy football right now. He has been all of the offseason. And we saw that come to play in that action against the Vikings. 6 touches, 23 yards. 3.8 yards average is not great, but he got a touchdown. You saw 6 touches. The Raiders are going to be a run-first offense. It's going to funnel through Zamir White. Look back at what he did last year when he was the workhorse back for the Raiders, was a league winner in fantasy football. As long as he stays healthy, Zamir White is a player that you want to target at a beautiful ADP. Saw in action in preseason, he will rise or at least be a player that fantasy managers have full confidence in selecting where he's being selected in drafts currently. All right, another faller here. We got Justin Fields. You see the ADP on the screen there, 176.3. And you might say, well, why are you even talking about Justin Fields? Like in single quarterback redraft leagues, we're not even looking at Fields. But I'm telling you guys right now, for the past 2 weeks, I have seen people targeting Justin Fields in Underdog drafts as a late round quarterback. And he has been a player, if you've been paying attention in fantasy football, that the fantasy community has been talking about because he's been taking the first team reps for the Steelers and those high upside games that we've seen out of Justin Fields in fantasy over the last 2 years. Get in people's minds. You start thinking, well, hey, if Russell Wilson doesn't end up being the quarterback one, you got Pickens here, you got a good run game, you got Freiermuth, new offensive coordinator. I'm going to get some shares of Justin Fields, right? And at the end of the day, what we got out of Justin Fields was 5 of 6 through the air. Not awful, 67 total passing yards. And then in terms of rushing, we didn't see nearly as much, 3 carries, 2 total yards. But there just seemed to be, some disconfiguration here. Justin Fields in this offense didn't look fully comfortable. There's still time to get that fixed and adjusted and for Fields to rise back up in terms of ADP. But overall, he just didn't look completely comfortable if you watch this game. And it just kind of felt like the same old Justin Fields. And ultimately, I mean, 5 of 6, not awful, pretty dang good by all means. But if you just watched, there was just something off here, and still plenty of time to get that corrected. But I think at the end of the day, for a lot of people who are getting overly confident or excited about Justin Fields, maybe that confidence takes a step back at this current moment. Do not forget that I am still running several streams throughout the week where I am hopping into real 2024 fantasy football drafts on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't want to wait any longer to draft 2024 fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog has all kinds of different unique contests that you guys can enter, including their flagship Best Ball Mania, where somebody is going to win up to $1.5 million. This is the best way to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season. These are the sharpest drafts throughout the offseason. Plus, Underdog already has week 1 NFL pick'ems out where you guys can play in their new streaks format and win up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch, the link is down below as well. Get you a first time 50% deposit match up to $250 plus a mystery pick'em that you guys can use towards that streaks up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch. Don't forget, when you sign up, we'll get you that first time 50% deposit match on Underdog Fantasy. All right, next up, let's talk about Tank Dell, the Houston Texans. And for the rest of the video, just risers, no more fallers, but a couple guys here that I do want to touch on. And for Tank Dell, I think the interesting thing here is, finishing the day with just one catch, 34 yards, a touchdown. It just feels like this is a wide receiver that CJ Stroud looks for time in and time out. You go back to last season, now to start the offseason, coming back from injury. Tank Dell, a guy who CJ Stroud just has that immediate chemistry with. I think at an ADP of 34.7, very close to Stephon Diggs. ADP on, both Sleeper and Underdog. People are going to start saying, I think Tank Dell could be the guy with the established chemistry. Stephon Diggs, maybe still a good, player that I want to take in fantasy, but people are going to start to say potentially, I want Tank Dell instead at this ADP. He's already used to this offense. Like I said, chemistry with CJ Stroud. And I just think overall that one long touchdown to Tank Dell can definitely result in fantasy managers saying, I have more confidence in Tank Dell. I'm going to go ahead and select him. So I definitely think he is a player who that highlight reel kind of buzz will get to a lot of people, and he's going to continue to rise in ADP. And speaking of highlight reel buzz, let's talk about Dontavion Wicks of the Green Bay Packers. Came out of this game with a 65-yard touchdown reception from Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love, another player worth mentioning as a guy who is definitely a riser, 2 of 2, 63 total yards and a touchdown. So I definitely think that Jordan Love proving some of those, people against his contract, or at least silencing them after this performance, just two throws on that drive for Jordan Love and a 65-yard touchdown to Dontavion Wicks, who's an ADP of 116.5 on Underdog, and is a player who's already been in kind of the sleeper category, has had a ton of buzz throughout the offseason, a guy that people will target over Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs on the same roster. And I'm telling you right now, that ADP for Dontavion Wicks is going to continue to get more and more enticing for a lot of fantasy managers. So highlight reel buzz is real. The copium is real for Dontavion Wicks. He's a name in fantasy football right now that people are absolutely going to target. All right, let's talk about my boy Trevor Lawrence coming in at an ADP of 118.7 on Underdog. If you're in single quarterback leagues, whether you're on Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, whatever, T-Law is a guy, if you go zero quarterback, punt the position, that you can absolutely grab as your QB1. I think the thing that I've been saying all offseason long that I try to remind people of in terms of Trevor Lawrence is he had 3 major injuries last year. There were multiple games that he shouldn't have even played in. Everyone's like, Trevor Lawrence had such a down year. At the end of the season, Trevor Lawrence was just falling off. The Jags offense was falling off. Yeah, Christian Kirk was hurt, and Trevor Lawrence was playing hurt. That was the reason why. Now he's fully healthy. A great drive out of T-Law, 3 of 4, 42 total passing yards, was dicing it up out there, and a touchdown. He looked just as good as Joe Burrow with the Bengals. So Trevor Lawrence, pretty simple here, looked good. Also worth mentioning, Brian Thomas Jr. had a big play in this game with a 41-yard catch. Trevor Lawrence, that's my guy. come on, he's going to continue to rise for me in terms of ADP. I want to go through some rookie running backs here who are risers. Let's talk about Bucky Irving, 4.7 yards per carry, 28 yards on the ground, 6 total touches. Touchdown, looked very good with the opportunities that he was given in that preseason action against the Bengals. So if you're a Rachaad White hater, you're probably going to go ahead and roast me in the comments. I totally get it because Rachaad White is still the player that I had the most confidence in at running back for the Bucks. But if you do like Bucky Irving, I definitely think at this point looks like a great handcuff. And you definitely saw what you wanted to see if you've been a Bucky Irving believer throughout the offseason. And then Sean Tucker, worth mentioning, 10 touches, 68 total yards, 6.8 yards per carry as well. So this Buccaneers running back room looking pretty good behind Rachaad White. White's still the guy for me, but Bucky Irving definitely made the most out of his touches in his preseason action thus far. All right, Jalen Wright, 10 total touches against the Falcons, 55 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Another player who's been a really popular handcuff name with Raheem Mostert at age 31, and then Devon Achane being a very injury-prone running back. At least he was in his rookie season. Now, Jalen Wright, a really talented prospect that a lot of people like, goes to the Dolphins. Seems like a good prospect in terms of what this offense does as a whole. If you watch the touches from this game, if you watch this game, the highlights, whatever, Jalen Wright looked fast, looked good, looked like a player that fits the Dolphins offense, like everyone's been saying. Obviously made the most out of his touches. I think he's a player to continue to heavily keep an eye on. And in terms of like late round rookie running back handcuffs, this is a guy who's going to continue to get selected. Gave fantasy managers every reason, all the confidence to continue to draft him. All right, and let's look at the Giants running backs. One rookie running back here, and then one non-rookie running back here. Tyrone Tracy going at an ADP of 191 overall. And then on the other hand, we've got second-year running back Eric Gray going at an ADP of 213.6. And what's interesting here is now we have fantasy managers starting to say, I don't know if I have full confidence in Devin Singletary as the RB1 for the Giants. What does he really bring to the table? Albeit he was a league winner off the waivers last year, but that was with the Texans. And then what if he gets injured? Who's the next guy up? We look at what Tyrone Tracy did. He had 5 touches, 26 yards on the ground, 5.2 yards per carry, but he looked really good. I mean, he looked like this is who the Giants want as their RB2, and he's really the player I think getting the most buzz right now, but I think Eric Gray's really close because you look at what he did: 4 touches, 52 yards on the ground, 13 yards per carry, and he had 2 touchdowns. So this is a really interesting situation. I think we're going to want to monitor any coach speak, training camp buzz, and continue to watch the touches for both these backs in Giants preseason action. Let me know in the comments which Giants running back you guys think is worth targeting if there's one over the other at the current moment. All right, next up, let's talk about Jordan Mason of the Niners. We know right now Christian McCaffrey, who, disclaimer, will be fine, is dealing with an injury. And then on the other hand, we've got Elijah Mitchell dealing with an injury too. Jordan Mason has gotten some good buzz, good coach speak coming out of training camp. And then we combine that with the fact that the Niners went out and signed Matt Breida, who got 6 total touches in this game and came out with 0 total yards, had a catch for 5 yards. And then we look on the other hand at Jordan Mason, all that positive buzz, 6 touches, 34 total yards, 5.7 yards per carry and a touchdown. I've already seen in Best Ball Mania drafts people target Jordan Mason up to 40 spots against ADP. I am not exaggerating, although the time I saw that was a player who took C-Mac at the 1.1. Maybe wasn't sure if they're going to get Jordan Mason at the next turn, but overall, I have seen Jordan Mason go at least 20 picks before ADP in the last 2 drafts I've done on average. So fantasy managers definitely paying attention to Jordan Mason, this situation, obviously tied to the Niners offense, worried about Christian McCaffrey's injury, whatever it is. I think it's very viable that Jordan Mason comes in and is the RB2 for the Niners. We'll have to continue to monitor this situation as it goes on. Right, next up, let's talk about Will Shipley. 7 total touches on the ground, 23 yards, 3.3 yards per carry. I mean, not fantastic, but he did have a catch that went for 7 yards and a touchdown. There's been a lot of buzz around Will Shipley in terms of training camp, has gotten touches in the red zone. work with the number ones. Will Shipley, a guy coming out of college, the unique skill set, looks like a player that could fit this Eagles offense. Obviously, Saquon is the guy here, but then got a lot of people who are like, well, Saquon might get hurt this year. I don't like Saquon, or I'm worried that Saquon will get hurt. Who's the next guy up? Is it Will Shipley? Is it Kenneth Gainwell? Is it somebody else? And I think that Kenneth Gainwell, who had 5.8 yards per carry, not too bad there, could definitely be a viable option. A guy in this offense who could be an RB2, a guy that I've liked in the past as a sleeper in terms of this Eagles backfield. But right now, I think Will Shipley showing some upside, gets in the end zone. He's a player at the end of underdog drafts you're going to continue to see get selected in the 17th, 18th round, and might end up being a guy that we view as the handcuff to Saquon Barkley as we get closer to the month of September. Here's a fun one for you guys. We're going to end the video with Carson Steele, an ADP of 216 overall in underdog. This is a guy who, does have to make the final 53-man roster for the Chiefs, but if you're paying close attention to Chiefs fans and Chiefs training camp and everything, a lot of people think Carson Steele has a very strong chance. We'll have to see. I mean, right now we've got, injury, illness stuff going on with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Then Isaiah Pacheco is obviously the clear-cut RB1, but everyone's kind of like looking at who's going to be that RB2, that handcuff I can get. There's a time in the offseason people were targeting Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then we started to see more buzz around Deneric Prince, who was fine. 4 total carries, 16 yards for Prince, and then 4 yards per carry. Excuse me. He also had 2 catches for 10 yards. So I think if you're following Deneric Prince, like that's all fine. If you watch Carson Steele in this game, he just had a little bit of I don't know, declare it upside in this game. Looked good. 4 total touches, 29 yards on the ground, 7.2 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Just looked like a guy who fits this Andy Reid offense, and I think he's definitely a player, especially if you draft Pacheco early, that you're going to see drafted potentially as a handcuff right now in underdog drafts. Just one of those players who kind of scroll a little bit, you say, hey, this guy might actually be able to put together something unique in this offense this year, even if Pacheco's fully healthy, be a guy that Andy Reid ends up utilizing. So we'll continue to monitor the situation. I'm not going to overreact. I think that Carson Steele definitely very interesting at this point in August. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content or find it helpful, be sure to join the community by hitting that subscribe button down below. This is all we do here all year long, free fantasy football content, trying to do whatever I can to help you guys win your upcoming fantasy leagues. Let me know in the comments down below what risers, fallers you guys are paying the closest attention to. If I missed anybody that you think needed to be in today's list, drop them down below. I did record this before Sunday's action, so I know, like at the time I was recording this, Marvin Mims caught a touchdown from Bo Nix. There's going to be other stuff that happens. There's going to be other injuries maybe by the time that you watch this, so let me know in the comments down below what you guys are paying close attention to. And that'll do it for today's video. With that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.